All right, everybody. It looks like we are live on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. This is Seminole Sidelines Live, the bowl reaction show. Appreciate those of you joining and watching. Please make sure to comment down below if you're going to Florida State's bowl game, the first bowl game for the Noles since 2019. And now we know who it is. Aria Masudi, Pat Burnham, Kurt Weiler, Bob Ferranti. We hope to have some more guests join us throughout this episode. And the Seminoles to the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando. It'll be the fourth appearance for Florida State in this bowl game under former names, of course, the Champs Bowl, the Blockbuster Bowl, which the Seminoles did compete in, and it's been called the Tangerine Bowl at times, and the Russell Athletic Bowl. But, gentlemen, I figure we just start by giving our thoughts. Florida State going back. Pat, we'll start with you, and then Kurt and Bob. The Noles looking for win number 10, and they'll get to do it against the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, they will. And listen, it's great to be doing this and that they're going to a bowl. Obviously, I think we're all excited about that. I love it that they're going to a top-tier bowl in the ACC. I love it that it's they're going to play in a warm weather climate, Orlando. I love it they're going to play against one of college football's biggest brands, but I wish that their opponent was as equally accomplished on the field as Florida State is. That's my only disappointment. I wanted to see Florida State have to play. Listen, in Oklahoma's Oklahoma, they beat two ranked teams this year when they were ranked. But listen, that's my only drawback to it is I wanted to see them play someone I thought was their equal on the playing field.
So I just want to start. I don't know why we had to get unnecessarily confusing today with the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl and the Cheez-It. Like, why does Cheez-It need to make things so? I mean, I guess I love Cheez-Its. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited to eat a whole bunch of them down in Orlando. But, like, it just feels unnecessary confusing. But, yeah, I mean, it's I think it's fitting. We've talked a lot about, I think if ever there were a time fans would have been willing to travel, Florida State fans would have been willing to travel for a bowl. I think this year where, I mean, like it says on the screen, first time since 2019 would have been, oh, there it is, Aria. Would have been that year. I know Holiday Bowl was in consideration. I know if none of the top three had wanted them, which I don't think was ever realistic, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I think, would have loved to have had Florida State. I think it's fitting that they get to stay home. I think it doesn't hurt from a recruiting standpoint of that's a game. It's after the early signing period, I guess, but people can come see the game. I think it'll be big from a fan perspective. I'm not sure how many Oklahoma fans will be especially motivated to make that trip. Some might just want to go to Orlando in Christmas. I mean, Disney at Christmas, there are worse places to be, but it's not a season. I mean, that's the worst regular season, I think, for them in almost 25 years. So it doesn't exactly inspire confidence, I'm sure, in that fan base. But no, it's great for Florida State. I mean, it seems like on paper a great chance at win number 10, I guess, is maybe the other way of looking at what Pat said of kind of it's the silver lining of playing a lesser opponent, I suppose.
Well, you should get win number 10 now. there's pressure in this ball game now.
I heard a little bit of frustration from the fan base over the opponent. I'm with y'all. It's not the sexiest opponent. But hey, Florida State hasn't played in a bowl in 2018, 2020, 2021. Not a math major. I'm not a history major, but it's pretty cool to be playing in a bowl game after missing out on 3 of the last 4. That's a big deal, I think, for this program. We talked about the growth of this program, where Mike Norvell is taking them, where you want recruiting to go, where you want the transfer portal to take this program long term. The next step is you're going to a bowl, you're playing in Orlando. Recruits can buy tickets and show up in the stands. Your fans from all over the state can see you very easily. It's not a long trip to Tallahassee. You're not paying the $500 hotel rooms. This has a lot of positives. The only thing that I thought was a little bit weird about this whole thing, honestly, is Florida State's going to play LSU in Orlando to open up the 2023 season. I didn't think that was going to be a great, way to kind of bookend the end of one year and the start of another. But hey, it's a bowl game, Florida State, Oklahoma. I'm happy to cover it. We'll see you all there.
Oh, it's much better than the right. And you're right, Bob. I mean, listen, it's just like we have a tendency to be critical. It's just like after the Syracuse game, and Mark and I are doing first impressions, and we're trying to figure out something to poke holes in, and you can't. But listen, I do get it. As a college football fan, listen, it would have been fun to see them play UCLA, Texas, South Carolina, Washington, somebody like that, right? I mean, somebody that has done the same things on the field that Florida State's done. Now, listen, as we said, Oklahoma they beat Oklahoma State when they were ranked number 22, and they beat Kansas when they were ranked number 19. So and as we'll get into later, and as we get more towards the bowl as well, it's an offense that can produce big plays for Oklahoma. So it's not a given. We see it every college Saturday that these things don't always work out on the chalk line.
So it's weird, Bob. You talked about it. Florida State plays in the Cheez-It Bowl, December 29th at Camping World Stadium. LSU plays at the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, January 2nd at Camping World Stadium, and then they're going to open the season against each other next year at Camping World Stadium. I tweeted, it's just like weird how that lined up. I guess both will get kind of a preview of what to expect logistically from playing a game there.
Yeah, all the fans will know what bars and restaurants to go to, which hotels to stay at, what time to leave for the game. I mean, it's got a tons of positive just from a scouting report standpoint.
Emmett Reed goes, come on, guys. Let's see how unhappy fans are when this game sells out. And you know what? Emmett's right. This game will sell out. Yeah. It will sell out pretty quickly, in my opinion. And when you look at the history between Florida State and Oklahoma, I think there's a lot of Florida State's fan base, a large faction that have seen Oklahoma have the better of the Noles many a times. And, just from my remembrance, I can remember, Jimbo Fisher's 2 losses in 2010 and 11. And I vaguely remember the 2000 championship game. I believe that was the one Mark Richt left Florida State. Is that right? And the Noles only scored. They didn't score an offensive point. They had a safety, right? I believe that's right.
Can we please forgive Mark Richt for that?
I do. I barely remember it. I'm just saying. I think this
some people may not have yet.
No, I think there's a lot of built-up frustration playing Oklahoma. And this stat actually kind of caught me off guard that Bobby Bowden was 0 for 4 against the Sooners and Jimbo 0 for 2. So,
well, that goes in line with what Jimbo's got going on down in College Station this year. So.
Right. Florida State's one win against Oklahoma was in 1965? Before any of us were born.
That's correct. Before any of us were born. I'm glad that Kurt made the. Now, listen, I will say this. Ari and I were talking about a little bit before we came on the show. I grew up listening to my dad talk about Coach Bowden when I was a young kid. And the game where I became a Florida State fan was 1981 when they played in the Orange Bowl against Oklahoma. And the first time I'd ever seen those shiny gold helmets with that really cool spear on them. And I'm not going to say how old it was because then y'all know how old I am. But anyway, I was young enough that I was impressed by that really cool helmet and all the stories I had. So when Ari and I were talking about it, I kind of got nostalgic about the fact that, we've played Oklahoma since then. But when I hear Florida State, Oklahoma, what I really think about is when I was a kid, and that's when I first started following Florida State on a regular basis.
And those were games that put Florida State on the map, early in the Bowden years, leading up to making this program one that was prominent nationally, leading up to Oktoberfest and all those road games in 1981. So FSU Oklahoma, I think, means something to a lot of the fans who are, both old school and new school too. So it'll be fun to kind of see that.
Fans, make sure, by the way, if you're planning on going to the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando, let us know. Give us a comment and we'll give you a shout out. Let us know where you're traveling from. And should be a fun crowd. I think it'll be a pro Seminole crowd down there in Orlando. And Noles will play in that stadium a couple times over the next few months. And so it should be a lot of fun between the Noles and the Sooners. All right, well, gentlemen, now that we know who we're playing, there was anticipation leading up to it. And a lot of dominoes had to fall to get Florida State in Orlando playing in this bowl game. Let's focus a little bit more on Oklahoma. We're going to have plenty coming up, breaking down the Sooners. Seminole Sidelines will have a full episode on it. First and Noel will. Pat's done a great job this year with Know Your Enemy. We look forward to getting an inside look at the Sooners from behind enemy lines. And so that's not the goal of this particular show. But on paper, it looks like a favorable matchup for Florida State. Pat, it's going to come down, obviously, to who's available and who's not in these types of games. But what are your early impressions of this Oklahoma team?
Well, when you start looking at how they've played this year, not exactly who they've played. They've played some really, they lost to Baylor by a field goal. They played Texas Tech, who was a bowl team that a lot of people thought Florida State was going to play. They took them to overtime. They played a one-score game against Kansas State. But listen, this is not everybody thought when Brent Venables went to Oklahoma that was going to tighten up their defense right away, and it just hasn't happened. They are not a very good team defensively. They give up their 109th in plays allowed over 20 yards through the air, 104th in plays allowed of over 10 yards on the ground. And as we all know, and we've seen time and time again, Mike Norvell and this 2022 offense, they produce big plays by the handful. So they're going to have their hand. Oklahoma will have their hands full with Florida State's offense. You got to think that that's a matchup that Florida State should be able to take advantage of. And then on the other side of the ball, you got Jeff Lebby running that Oklahoma offense. They are, when you think Jeff Lebby, think Tennessee and Josh Heupel and UCF. When they are a tempo offense, they are 128th in time of possession. They do run the ball very well, and I'll let Kurt talk about who may be available a little bit later, and that'll even impact this game more. But they're about average statistically in all offensive categories, but they'll take shots like that offense does. If you watch Tennessee, that's what Jeff Lebby is going to try to do with the Oklahoma offense, or if you've seen UCF over the past years when Josh Heupel was there. Their defense plays a tremendous amount of snaps. They have played the second most in all of college football. And as Kurt gets into who's available, I think that you're going to see that this looks like a favorable matchup for Florida State at face value heading into this ball game. But listen, the transfer portal opens officially tomorrow, I believe, and we'll see who pops in and out of that thing. And there's still questions of who's going to play in the bowl for Florida State. But at face value, this looks like a game where Florida State has a distinct advantage.
Yeah, Brett Venables, both him and Mike Norvell had press conferences today. Brett obviously was the Clemson defensive coordinator until this year, replacing Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Very complimentary of Mike Norvell. Kind of just talked a lot about him and kind of saying some to the effect of, as a fly on the wall, as someone who's kind of watched them, yep. It's impressive how he said, I think they've built it the right way. It's just been impressive how Mike Norvell, and it's funny, I think a few Oklahoma writers kind of asked Mike Norvell, well, you're in year 3 now. How did you kind of get now to where you are? What's that process of building a program? Because that's kind of what they're going through with Brett Venables. When it comes to the team, the offense is, Dylan Gabriel, their quarterback, is somebody Mike Norvell has familiarity with. He was the quarterback at UCF until this year. And obviously, Mike Norvell, when he was at Memphis, had some, I think 2019 was his first season, and that he had some real exciting games against that UCF team. I think finally beat them in 2019. He's very complimentary of Dylan, and I think the game they didn't have Dylan was the Texas game where they got destroyed because they didn't have Dylan Gabriel. But when they've had him, the offense has been pretty good. I think there have been some opt-outs. I think Eric Gray, their second team all Big 12 running back who transferred from Tennessee has said, apparently Venables said today he's opting out. He ran for over 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns. Apparently both their starting offensive tackles are opting out and kind of starting to prepare for the Senior Bowl and the NFL draft. And then apparently Jalen Redmond, who I know has 10 tackles for loss as a defensive lineman, is also opting out. So there are some hits there, but as of now, it would seem Gabriel's going to play. Marvin Mims, their 1,000-yard receiver, has said he wants to play in the bowl game. So there is definitely, like Pat said, some talent on that offense that will really test FSU's defense. As we didn't see a ton down the stretch, frankly.
And that's a defense that's going to struggle and has all year. I think Florida State, depending obviously on who opts into the bowl game. I know a lot of the guys have said the right things. We'll have to wait till December 29th for sure to know who will suit up for the Noles. But it seems like a matchup where, Florida State should be able to move the football. And they have against much better defenses all year long, and Oklahoma's in trouble. I think Brent Venables knows that. The question will be for FSU in game, can they protect the football? Things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. Pat, I kind of liked what Terry said in a comment that we just popped on, and I'll pop it back on. Terry Vaughn, we do, I think, gain more street cred with wins over blue blood programs. So this is an opportunity for FSU, not just to get the 10th win of the season, but I think to maybe make a kind of plant its flag, so to speak, in college football.
Well, yeah. Listen, Everyone, he's right. It does resonate better than a win against Texas Tech, and that's just based off brand and reputation, and not necessarily what's going on currently with each program. But it's never a bad thing when you beat Oklahoma, whether you're a 9-win team or a 3-win team. So yeah, listen, and as you said, they got some players, Kurt. They've got some playmakers on offense. They've struggled on defense. They played a little bit better on defense towards the end of the year. They only gave up 13 points to Oklahoma State, 20 to West Virginia. West Virginia ran the ball most of the time, but Iowa State 13 points. No juggernauts there offensively, but then again, you look across that schedule, and they've given up 48 and 35 and 42. They played a little bit better defensively towards the end of the year, but I don't think any of the offenses, particularly West Virginia, Iowa State, or anything like Florida State's offense.
Big picture, boys. This is a game for FSU. We talked about the 10th win. What kind of opportunity do you think Mike Norvell has in terms of maybe not just the bowl practices that a lot of these guys need to continue to get better and to rep under Norvell's system and that culture, but what could 10 wins do, Pat, for recruiting even and where FSU wants to go?
Well, I mean, double-digit wins are hard to get to. You don't see very many programs that do that year in and year out. Coming from where Florida State has come since Mike took over the program in 2020, it puts an emphatic stamp on this season. That this was no fluke, and I don't think anybody's saying that it was, but I'm just saying it just goes ahead. It's a chance. Every opportunity that you play a football game, it's a chance to reaffirm what you've done the previous week or weeks before, and and obviously it's listen, people want to talk about Florida State being back. Well, when you win 10 games, you can go in and say, hey guys, we're getting closer to being a national power like we used to be with those 10 wins. And I think those 10 wins resonates in living rooms and with parents and kids and prospects. And, I think it's a big number, right? I mean, people view 10-3 a lot differently than they do 9-4.
Kurt,
yeah,
what do you think? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of what Pat said, I think is dead on. I mean, it's a win that, like, because of some of the factors we mentioned, and we'll see what the spread ends up being, I think could be devalued. But I think the 10-win milestone is, I think, more important than anything. I mean, it'll be interesting to watch. This will be kind of, I mean, Mike Norvell, I think, is it 3 years tomorrow he was introduced? I'm pretty sure it was December 5th, 2019. So I think it's 3 years tomorrow since his introductory press conference. This will be the first time he's kind of got to balance recruiting season and preparing his team for a bowl. And he talked about that some today, talking about how he kind of, and it makes sense with how coaches are and how he's wired. He said he had kind of different models for whichever bowl FSU got placed in of how he's going to balance the two, because obviously recruiting this time of year, very important. And obviously doing that with 9, going for a 10th win does make things easier. But he also talked about, I mean, the importance of this will be the last time we play together as this team, and that means something, and we need to treat it as such. And I mean, obviously, yeah, you can't, like they did the first 2 off seasons, all your eggs can't be in the recruiting basket. You have to balance the two, because that 10th win would mean something.
Well, and just look at this, guys. I mean, if they were to get that 10th win, Mike Norvell can go into a living room, especially in the state of Florida, and really anywhere in the country, and say, we beat LSU, we beat Miami, we beat Florida, and we beat Oklahoma. And
none of those teams all have their faults, but that, like, when you talk about brands, that's 4 impressive like wins that resonate.
Right, because and listen, and that's what, and when those kids are going to see that, right? I mean, they don't necessarily see the ins and outs. They've been busy playing their own seasons, right? They don't know the faults of each and all of those brands like we do, because we've been paying attention to them all year. That the kids don't, but I'm just saying we study them a little bit, right? I mean, that's what we do. So, but I think when you look at that, and I don't think anybody sitting here on this call or program would have thought that at the end of the year we would be talking about a Florida State team that beat LSU, Florida, Miami, and now potentially Oklahoma. I mean, it's that in itself says a lot about what this Mike's done with this program.
Can a game like this too be big for FSU's returning nucleus for next year? I know momentum really, bowl games they don't always do as much for that specific roster going into the next season. It could be more macro things for the program. But this group seems like it's going to have a large nucleus coming back. What would beating Oklahoma and creating potentially that momentum do for the continued just the rise of where this team could go next year?
Bowl games could be unpredictable. I feel like we will see from time to time kind of the team that like maybe a heavy favorite not play as well as you would think they would, just because, especially really I should say non-playoff bowl games, because motivation is kind of the wild card of it all. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I think it can absolutely be a springboard. I think, I mean, I am not necessarily, I wouldn't say I would normally be a believer in momentum season to season, especially, but I think it's hard to deny that how FSU finished the 2021 season, especially, I mean, regardless, obviously the loss at Florida, but to go from 0-4 to almost bowl eligible, I think did play a role in how they started this season. I think there was a confidence built through that. And I think I'm not going to say that a loss in this game, because at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. I'm not going to say it would take something out of the balloon, like deflate, to be a bit deflating. But I do think it's a chance to just kind of, I mean, you obviously end the season on a 6-game win streak with, I mean, adding another impressive resume win to that, and I think could potentially affirm some guys' decisions of, I want to come back and be a part of this next year.
Yeah, I agree with Kurt. I think maybe the bigger ramifications are into the offseason, going to the offseason with going to offseason conditioning with some momentum and some confidence and some positive energy as a team that wants to come back and figure out how to get those wins they didn't get. I mean, you could spin it forward going all the way to the next season. If you lose, well, provides them the motivation to have a great offseason and a strong camp. But I think short term, as Kurt said, I think, listen, it gives you some motivation, a win going into the offseason. 10 wins is something you can sell on the recruiting trail. And obviously 10 wins is something the portal will still be active after this bowl game. And could have a huge impact on what's going on with the transfer portal. And we know there's some prospects that aren't going to sign until February, the normal national signing day. We talked to Jabril Rawls. He's locked in. He's told us that. But I'm just saying you'll have guys that are still going to be making decisions after the bowl game's over about where they're going to go. And then again, I think more importantly, it gets these guys, if a win, 10 wins, that momentum springboards into their offseason program with Josh Storms.
Yeah, I think Coach Bowden said that a lot too through the years. Everybody had a smile on their face, walking through the hallways when you're going through your off-season workouts. When it's early in the morning, you have to do the hard work. You at least remembered your last game was a win. Just that kind of positive memory that I think will stick with a lot of guys throughout the long, long off-season. Where, Mike Norvell loves the motto of work and putting in that time, then you get the reward out. Well, now it's time to finish the job, finish the drill against what we think will be a potentially shorthanded and an opponent that's maybe not going to stack up nearly as well on paper just yet. But we'll have to see how that kind of plays out in the coming weeks with who's available really for both teams, because we don't truly know who's available besides Jamie Robinson, who emphatically said this week there was no doubt, there was no debate, he will play in the bowl game. Jared Verse has said that he most likely will play. After that, there are some question marks really as to who from Florida State will practice and play. Although when you hear things like this from your veterans, you get the feeling that a lot of these guys are invested, not just for themselves, but for their teammates, for this program, for the guy next to them, that they do want to play. I think those are kind of good signs as you go into these next couple weeks ahead of the bowl game.
Yeah, I agree with what Bob said. Listen, the pro scouts that I have talked to over the last several weeks have told me the two guys that have the most to lose, and not that they have anything to lose, but the guys that they have the highest upside from an NFL perspective are Jared Verse and Jamie Robinson. So I guess what I'm saying is if those guys are willing to play, why, if you're a lesser known NFL prospect, why wouldn't you want to play? You're only allowed. So this is what I don't understand. Listen, you can get hurt anytime, anywhere, doing anything. We see non-contact injuries all the time. I'm not a fan of. You only get so many opportunities to play football. You're only not guaranteed any amount of games. I would hope that listen, I'm old school generation, right? Get off my lawn, don't sit out. That's not what you do. And so I hope they all play. We know that may not be likely, simply because it may not be NFL. It may be, hey, I'm going into the portal. I'm not saying any starters are. There's unknown things that we don't know, but I agree when you got Verse and Robinson saying they're playing, and the NFL scouts we're talking to saying those are the highest 2 rated guys on our books towards this spring's draft. You would hope everyone would fall in line with them, right? And let's face it, typically everyone, especially on defense, has fallen in line with Jared Verse and Jamie Robinson and Fabian Lovett. So hopefully that will continue to be the same tune we hear for the bowl game.
I think, guys, the last few minutes of this, we wanted to keep it short, about half an hour or so. But the viewers are just skyrocketing up at the moment as we're doing this. So let's spend some time talking about the college football playoff. We finally know now who the 4 teams are that are going to battle it out for the national championship this season. You see it on your screen in front of you. We don't have an in-depth, breakdown of each of these teams for you, but we do have thoughts. Guys, when you were watching the show earlier today and you saw the news, what were your overall impressions of this version of the college football playoff and what will be, right, the final season? Or is it 2 seasons left?
One more.
So the second to last season of the 14 playoff. Seems like it might be about as serving all of college football as it has in the last few years.
I think they got the right 4 teams, and I think they put them in the right order. I'm glad. I'm sure there was some temptation to jump Ohio State ahead of TCU to have that rematch in the semifinal. But Ohio State was sitting at home this weekend. I don't think they had any business jumping TCU, who had already beaten Kansas State and lost in overtime in the rematch, and then had gotten through the regular season 12-0. So no, I think they got the right teams. I'm interested. I'm hopeful that I think there is a chance. I feel maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into this. We talk so often about how rarely the semifinals have been good games. I think both of these have the chance. I think Ohio State, for all the problems that went wrong in that loss to Michigan, is talented enough that it could give Georgia a game. Maybe the skill position talent could make for an entertaining game. And I think Michigan TCU has a chance to be a good game. I think people have underrated TCU. I think the whole argument to put Bama in was nonsense, and I'm glad it was not entertained.
Yeah, I'm on board. I'm fine with who they selected. If you put anybody else in that, in that 4 slot, Alabama, Tennessee, anybody else, it's just, Alabama didn't deserve it any more or less than Tennessee. I mean, they were both about equal, in my opinion, when you start looking at this thing. I think it's funny that when we supposedly have a committee of experts meeting to seed these things, right? To pick these things. And we got Nick Saban going on television like a used car salesman on the last night of a big sale trying to empty the lot. I don't understand it. Y'all know I have a lot of appreciation for Alabama and Nick Saban, but listen, there's a panel of your peers selecting this. Why are we doing this on the night of the playoffs? I didn't like that. I don't understand it. And listen, Alabama is my second favorite team besides behind Florida State. So some people might argue that they're equal. But long story short, I think they got the teams right. I think anything can happen. I think the Michigan TCU game is going to be fascinating. If Ohio State plays their best ball game, that Georgia game could be very interesting. Listen, there's some great bowl games above and beyond that.
Sorry, Bob. I will say that I don't say this often. Credit to Dabo Swinney, who got asked after last night's game if his team deserved to be in the conversation because Nick Saban was jockeying, and he said, "We wasted our chance." I don't say often credit to Dabo Swinney, but thank you for being rational about this and not becoming the used car salesman and coming off that way.
And normally I would say a conference champion deserves a spot in the playoff. But again, this whole structure is flawed when you have a Power 5 and you have 4 spots. So it doesn't really function in its current lineup. I'm good with the 4, just like you guys said. I'm good with the 4 in the order they've got. I think we've got 2 entertaining games. I do think we're going to see Georgia and Michigan in the end, but let's enjoy them. Let's watch them. Let's do it.
Hey, and just think if this was a 12-team playoff, guys, and you happen to draw Utah right now. I mean, if you're any of these, listen, even Georgia, I don't think right now. I'm not saying Georgia would beat Utah, but I'm saying I don't think any of these four. That's why I'm fascinated about getting to the. I wish it was 8 or 16 because I'm not a fan of the bye once we move to 12. But listen, if this had been an 8 or 12 or 16-team playoff, some of these early matchups were going to be fascinating. I don't know if you guys saw the graphic ESPN was showing if this was a 12-team playoff. I don't, but listen, I don't. There are a couple teams that are not in this playoff that I don't think any playoff team wants anything to do with right now. So these 4 are probably very happy it's a 4-team playoff.
If there'd been chalk this weekend, if USC had won and TCU had won, Florida State would have been the 11th team in the 12-team playoff.
Hey, I do have a question. Listen, and I saw you kind of had that. You were moving back and forth based on the game, and then I saw how it ended up. But I got to ask you guys this, and it's off topic. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual bowls itself. But I know y'all probably watched the USC Utah game, and we're getting ready to vote for the Heisman, and the quarterback for USC had something rather inappropriate written on his fingernails. And of course, it throws me off that now fingernail art is a part of college football. I did not know. I didn't think I'd live long enough to see that, but I certainly have. But just your thoughts on a guy that's potentially going to be a lifelong representative of college football if he wins the Heisman, showing that kind of lack of sportsmanship on national television.
It doesn't bother me. As long as you're fine with it getting memed, which I know the Utah account when they won, they photoshopped over and put back to back on his like. As long as you're opening yourself up to that, if that's how you want to play, it is the ultimate like. And honestly, I know he tweeted today about like Max Duggan. Like I think he took offense to how people like played like the hero, like we're making TCU's quarterback Max Duggan the hero and felt like he should get some of that. I think he was getting that. It to me falls under if you're going to play like that, you've got to be able to take the jokes too. Like you don't want to be the guy who's ripping on everyone else, but when people start making fun of you, you take it personally and it becomes a problem. As long as you can take it and give it, I'm fine with it. Would I do it? No, but to each their own.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's interesting that we're going to break the Heisman down to these last 2 games, right? I mean, the body of work gets thrown out the window for these college for Max Duggan and Caleb Williams. I have no idea. Like I told you guys off record, I'd vote for Bryce Young. There's no one that's clearly put themselves ahead of him. If we're still sitting here talking about whether it's Caleb Williams or Max Duggan, just give it to Bryce. Bryce has played as well, if not better than both those guys. Give it to him. Let's move on.
It's an interesting thing because, I mean, he won the Heisman last year. How does this year statistically stack up in terms of wins and just passing yards, rushing yards, all that? I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers side by side. It's always a great debate. Kurt, you got to figure this out this year yourself. So
yeah, I've got to figure it out. I have a general idea. What I'll say to you, Pat, I don't disagree. And Bryce Young is, I think, one of the more important players to his team in the country. My thing is, if I'm going to make you a back-to-back Heisman winner, you have to build off of it. And if you look at his season, I just don't think it was as good as last year's. And that's probably a fault of the offensive line he had and the receiver group he had. But we can't just discredit that. We can't say, oh, well, he would have had these many passing yards if, like he had his receivers.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, listen, there's no clear – I think he's played – I guess my point would be he's played as good as either of those 2 guys. There is no clear delineation in my stand. And maybe – listen, there may be somebody else that's better than those 3 guys. I mean, if the kid from Michigan didn't get hurt, he's probably in this discussion.
Yeah. I mean, Blake Corum
definitely would be. Yeah. Last year was my first time. I wasn't going to vote for Bryce Young until the SEC championship game. I was going to vote for Will Anderson. And so I voted for Bryce Young last year. They don't want me, I think, talk about it. I'm going to vote this year. But.
Yeah, to me too, though. I've really enjoyed watching Duggan play at TCU.
That was a hell of a game he played. You can't take anything away from it.
And I like to see those schools that don't get that love on a regular basis be able to have their moment in the sun too. But Stroud was really good at Ohio State this year too, and Bryce Young was really good again. And so it's like. We've chatted about it, Pat, you and I, and Kurt, I know we have on First and Knoll, but Jordan Travis, maybe not a favorite this year, but those numbers, when you put them side by side, I think it even highlighted more how good Jordan was for the Noles this season. And that to me is, Jordan would have never done, writing on his fingernails, F whoever or whatever.
Right.
But, which makes me thankful to have Travis as our quarterback. Like I didn't mind it, to answer your question, Pat. But again, you better be able to take the heat if you can't back. And you've lost twice to Utah this season. Is that right?
Yeah.
Caleb?
Yeah.
Now, who got effed? And, to keep this question, it wasn't Utah. It wasn't.
No, it was
not. And so
it was not.
That's crazy too. Can I ask you guys a final question? Just we'll wrap up here in the next 5 minutes. But if we were headed into a 12-team playoff, how would you have felt with Florida State at 13? I mean, this season that everyone was like 7 or 8 wins, and you're at the cusp of making a 12-team playoff.
Well,
didn't quite take care of business at NC State. That would be my one answer, right?
That's the one you look back at, because you're 2 spots out. You look back at that game as like what could have been.
Yeah.
Which is not fair because of what the preseason expectations were, but expectations change. That's just how people naturally think. Once they were 4-0, the bar kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at a 12-team playoff this year, probably the only team that you could argue against being in and Florida State being out would be Tulane, and that is a conference thing, right? That's where we're going back. That's where we're going back to brand, and Florida State's got a bigger brand. It's a better conference theoretically, right? I mean, I think the ACC probably was better than the AAC this year, but in recent years past, that has not been. They've been pretty much equal as far as top 25 teams, bowl teams, all that kind of thing. But if you look at the rest of the top 12 and who's in, it'd be hard to say that Florida State or, I would say that Tulane would be based on what would have been the 12 teams this year, Tulane. And again, is that a bias on my part? Because we haven't heard Tulane's name in forever. We usually associate Tulane with huge losses to Florida State. Outside of 1980 something when Mac Brown was there, that's about the last time I can remember Tulane beating Florida State. So again, that may be bias on my part, but it would we would certainly be spending more time poking holes in the other people's resumes because Florida State's right outside at ranked 13th, but yeah, it's gonna like they said on the television show today. In 2 years, we're going to be talking about why the 12th team is not as good as this team, that team, or the other team. Because now the further you get away from the elite teams in the playoff, the more room there is for discussion on who belongs in, right? So if you got 12 teams, there's a lot more talk about 13 through 18 being equal as there is. You can't make that argument when you go. You can't say the 8th place team and the rankings deserves to be ranked in the top 2, but you could certainly go back and say whoever's ranked 18th could be ranked 12th.
I think I think once you expand it to 12, teams don't really have a gripe. I don't think we need to expand it beyond 12. It will still exist. I understand that.
That's not my point being
no, but whether it's valid or not, I would say because with the 12-team playoff, some 3-loss teams are going to get in. I think you'll have plenty of in a 12-game season. You'll still have multiple mulligans. So miss me with the 17th place team should have been 11th. No, I'm sorry, dismissed.
Yeah, I think I'm with Pat though. I'm with Pat on this because then the argument changes. Excuse me while I continue to eat these Cheez-Its. I'm in the festive mood right now. I know y'all are
trying to get a damn sponsorship out of this while we're on.
I am. I need
an NIL already.
I have a whole box of extra toasty Cheez-Its, which, by the way, is the best kind of Cheez-Its.
Original Cheez-It, only way to go.
Original.
White cheddar Cheez-Its, also fantastic. I'm doing this for free for Cheez-It. Are you kidding me? What am I doing?
You can't get an NIL deal already.
I know. Well, at that
point,
Jordan
Travis is going to appear behind Ari's shoulder.
He's right over my shoulder.
Is he going to tweet? Is he going to tweet tomorrow? I woke up feeling the cheesiest. Is that going to announce the deal?
Did you guys see the hotel room?
Ari is going to be running around town with his cheesy outfits.
Did y'all see the hotel rooms?
Yes, I did.
They're letting fans stay on the field in those, right? I'm pretty sure some players are staying in them, and also I think they're setting them up on the field the night before the game for fans to stay in.
I believe that's true.
Right. But back to what we were talking about with the college football playoff, the conversation just changes because that's what always happens, right? It's going to become FSU fans pissed off at Tulane and thinking that program would never beat us. Let's go from 12 teams to 24 teams and let's do this, and that's whether we like it or not, that's going to be the conversation that comes.
Well, just look at if you looked at the 3 loss teams ranked 13th or worse right now, FSU, Oregon State, Oregon, UCLA. All right. So all 4 of those teams have a legitimate argument to be the 12th team, right? Their resumes are going to be a little bit identical. They all have their outside of Oregon State. They're all brands. So anyway, yeah, I think it's just going to be fat. And you're right. It's the silent, this is the vocal minority that we hear from, but people will, the conversations will be intense and people will be fired up about them. Listen, fans, right, just have the whole box out now. He's gone from a little bag. I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but he brought out a bag of Cheez-Its, and that has now gone and got the whole box of Cheez-Its. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. But fans are never happy if they feel like they get left out. They're gonna listen. I was riding home from the Louisiana game, and I got a buddy of mine text me, we gave up too many points in the fourth quarter. Fans are not happy. And I explained to him that, listen, you had guys that did not play. But anyway, so whether it's bowl games or scores or outcomes, fans are never going to be particularly happy. And I think it's going to be the water cooler debates 2 years from now are going to be fascinating as we start getting to this time of the season.
Well, boys, I think a pretty good comprehensive show talking about where Florida State's headed. If you're just joining us, the Noles are headed to Orlando, the Cheez-It Bowl. It'll be December 29th, 5:30 kickoff. Make sure you go get your tickets. Let's make that thing loud and proud for Florida State. You're in your home state for the first time since that Orange Bowl, I believe, in 2016 when you guys
Ari may look orange by the time he gets there if he keeps on eating cheeses at this rate.
I will be right there with Aria. I'm going to eat.
You've got 26 days worth of Cheez-Its to eat, my man.
I'm not eating any now, but those couple days I'm in Orlando, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, guys. And so we've got so much more coverage coming up on the Osceola.com. Make sure you subscribe. Holiday time, buy your folks, friends, loved ones a subscription to our website. We got some great deals going on, and we would appreciate your partnership and your friendship in our venture. And then what you can do for free is you can subscribe to our YouTube page, the Osceola's YouTube page. This show will be on there in full. You can get a Seminole Sidelines all season long replays from that, including Charlie Ward. We'll have a couple more in-studio Seminole Sidelines previewing the game against Oklahoma, and then, of course, recapping the game against Oklahoma. A lot of First and Noles coming up, a couple more with myself, Kurt, and Roberto Aguayo, and then great written coverage. And we're all looking forward to Pat's Osceola tailgates with Charles, with Fish, and, of course, with Mark Salva, who hope you feel better, Mark. You're a important member of Seminole Sidelines, so we miss you tonight on this one. But so much coverage coming. Know your enemy also, and I believe there'll be some bowl practices, right, Kurt, coming up that we'll have some media availabilities for and seeing where the Noles are and who opts in and who opts out of this bowl game.
Yeah, it sounds like later this next week there'll be some. I wonder if it won't align with when some visitors are on campus next weekend.
Okay. So a lot of recruiting news coming too. Keep it with Pat and, of course, with Fish. They've got some great coverage with Cade as well. Hopefully the Noles can finish strong. Pat, when is the early national? When is that national signing day?
December 21st. It's 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
So before, about a week before.
We are getting close. Yep.
Yep.
And, listen, they'll hit the road this week. I think for the most part they were on the road this weekend. We know that they saw Luke Cromenhawk. I believe they saw Lucas Simmons. I mean, they saw the committed kids. Mike was in home visit with Kenton Kirkland in Jacksonville, and then was back over in the Panhandle with Jabril Riles on Saturday. So yeah, nothing slowing down. They just moved to a different park to do it in. It's not happening on the football field. It's happening in high schools and living rooms across the South and across the state of Florida.
All right. Well, I hate that we're going to say goodbye. Our numbers are spiking right now watching this, but Make sure if you like this that you continue to subscribe to our coverage and our website. Plenty more coming up, as we mentioned. You can rewatch this on YouTube. You can re-listen to this on your favorite podcast site, Apple, Spotify, you name it. We've got you covered. And so until we talk to you again, Pat Burnham, good job today. Bob Ferranti, Kurt Weiler, appreciate your time. As always, I'm Aria Masudi, and this was Seminole Sidelines, the Bowl Reaction Show. Talk to you guys soon.